Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I am absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to interview Donna Kendrick, who is a certified financial planner practitioner, a grief recovery method specialist, and the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller titled A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years, which provides a financial roadmap to surviving the first 3 years of widowhood with a person's heart, soul, and finances intact. In 2013, at age 40, Donna lost her husband of 13 years. The loss was sudden. Gregory had taken his own life. Although she was educated, smart, organized, and financially savvy, Donna was emotionally crushed. She spent the next few years pulling herself together and raising her children, who were 8, 11, and 12 at the time. When she eventually learned that she was able to successfully handle the incredible challenges that had come into her life, Donna recreated her career so that she could help men and women in widowhood make the right financial decisions to feel empowered, smart, and in control. Through her company, Sefton Financial in Windmore, Pennsylvania, Donna helps families in transition dealing with widowhood, divorce, and blending families. And just as an aside, everyone, I want to say that I am so in sync with what Donna does because I had a similar experience when my husband passed. And if I hadn't had my CPA, my husband's CPA, actually guiding me and helping me, I don't think I would be talking with you on this podcast today. I mean, it literally was a part of what saved my life. So I am really eager to share Donna with all of you today. I'm looking forward to talking with Donna about her journey to standing on her own 2 feet after years of being out of the workforce and living away from America, the importance of getting support while making important decisions during grief, her volunteer work as a grief recovery method specialist, her step-by-step guides to the first 3 years of widowhood, and more for what will surely be a very important interview that will provide needed comfort, important insights, and empowerment for many of us on the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Many of us in the audience of our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience. So Donna, a warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for that welcome and for having me here. I am so excited to share the wisdom together and to just help share some of my experiences and to see how they can impact and help change others. So.
I was so excited when you came through for an interview because I lived what you do for people. And, we'll talk about it later, but we'll talk about that wagon train concept because I had one also. And it makes so much sense to have someone like you on board when people are going through deep grief. So let's start with the first question so everyone can kind of get to know you, which is kind of the sad part of your story. But the good part is you grew from it and here you are. So please tell us about your life and your travels with Gregory before you lost him to suicide and the heart-wrenching traumatic way you lost him.
Thank you so much. So, okay, let's everyone just who's listening understand that I was born and raised in Philadelphia, which means I talk really, really quick. And sometimes the G's on the end of the words drop off. So working becomes working. So here we go.
Well, you're talking to a Jersey girl, so between the two of us.
It was so funny. When I was younger, my mom was afraid of bridges. So I barely went to Jersey. We were Pocono people because there's no bridges that way. So people are like, you never went to the Jersey Shore. I'm like, she was petrified of bridges.
Goodness. She missed that on so much.
Yeah, I know. But yep, born and raised in Philadelphia. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a Philadelphia firefighter. Lovely upbringing, right? Parents split, but they still loved us very, very much. And years later, I can actually say pretty much my dad set me up on a blind date with the son of a Philadelphia cop. So a cop and a firefighter got together at the credit union and we're like, hey, how about your kid meet my kid? And then we can move them out. Like, I feel like that was the conversation, but it was wonderful. And originally that is how I met my husband, Gregory. Not that I couldn't get a date on my own, but it was a wonderful, wonderful way to meet him. And he was a very conservative, smart, loving, moral man. And he had a wonderful job with the US government. So before 9/11, it was, I think, US Customs and Immigration. After 9/11, it turned into US Homeland Security. And with that, we started traveling. So wound up pretty much like a military life. Almost every 2 years, our kids switched another school. We went over, lived abroad in Italy, and 2002, came back, had our third child, Squish, and then we went back in 2017 and lived abroad there. During that time, I actually gave up my career to follow Greg abroad, and it was a 4 to 5 year stay for us. I wound up teaching English to Italian kids, so they all have Philadelphia accents. Yes, they do. And we had the wonderful opportunity when you live abroad in the type of position Greg had. When you go back stateside, you can pretty much wind up anywhere. And I was like, oh, bub, please just promise me we'll be within an 8-hour drive of home, right? Like I just missed home. And what a wonderful opportunity to live abroad and to see Europe and do it with 3 kids. I don't know how we ever would have afforded it if we didn't live over there. Beautiful blessings for them, but I wanted to come home. My dad was homesick for years. So we come on back home. He got a position up in Newark, New Jersey. And I was like, close enough to Philly, let's go. So we came back home, lived in the Lehigh Valley for a little bit. And then he got positioned again to Philadelphia and didn't want to do the commute anymore. So in 2013, we packed everyone up one more time and we moved back to the Philadelphia suburbs, moved into my sister's school district. Her kids had been there for 12, 13 years. And I was like, how is it? Is it good? Are they nice? Here we come. And that's where we were. So we moved there probably in late July, August of 2013. What a lot of people didn't know is during our time up in Italy, or in the Lehigh Valley, that was a 2011, 2013, when we came stateside, Greg suffered from undiagnosed depression. And it was really hard. And he had battled what we would now say was depression when he was younger, when we were just first dating in our 20s. And really went to counseling. We went together and he got his toolkits in place. And that really helped him for such a long time. And he was so established in his career, but there was something
There was something like genetic or something in there.
And it got triggered, like something clicked. And so for 2 years, he really, really did suffer with depression. And again, it wasn't formally diagnosed for many reasons why, but I sat with him and we went on that journey. And one of the reasons we came to Philadelphia was to lower his stress level at work. So we took a downgrade in the job, not as many, more administrative, not as many larger decisions that he had to make. And it was getting better. And he was like home again at 5 o'clock. He used to drive and travel and be gone for weeks, months at times, or just have a really long work day. And then, so it was getting better and we were really happy. Kids started their new school, getting established in such a supportive, fun neighborhood, chili cook-offs, like good old fashioned America.
Nearby, the whole thing.
Yeah. And then I came home one day and it was a weekend and my son had a football game and he went home to take a nap. And when I came home, he had shot himself.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
And I remember that slow motion, like everything slows down. And I share that because I feel many times in life since his loss, if there's a time that the powers that be need me to slow down a bit, take a breath, and feel the next step, it takes me back to that moment. And I went to action, right? Like door locked, door shut, kids in a ride to my sister's house, neighbors, help me call the police. Here we go, dog in a cage, right? Like, so the police didn't, we had a big Irish setter. Like, you just moved into action. So that house was ready for when the police came, right? It was even funny. The police had come into the house and they were like, ma'am, you said he took his life in the upstairs bedroom. I'm like, yep. They're like, the door is locked. I was like, yeah, I locked that. I didn't want my kids coming in, but they were paranoid. Like, who locks the door if there's someone who passed away on the other side? For me, completely reasonable. For them, not. But that's really where the journey begins. And in the book that I wrote, I share those moments, those hours from that slow motion of opening the door and realizing he had passed. And then how I navigated the next day, hours, weeks, years. And that's where the story starts.
My God, I'm so sorry. But your story has such a positive thrust to it because of what you did from this horribly traumatic thing that happened in your life. So now Gregory is transitioned. You've been out of the workforce. You've been living away from America. You got to make a living. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. You want to share some of that with us? That must have been something else.
Yeah, I was actually at the time of Greg's loss working in my kid's school district as like a teacher's assistant. I think I was making $17,000 a year. And listeners out there, that's not going to feed 3 kids, right? And you do have the help of Social Security if you are lucky. And I had control of the finances. Greg and I were savvy. We had a financial advisor when we were younger. So I knew that life insurance would probably be coming in. And I knew where most of the accounts were. I was the partner in the relationship that did the daily, the bills as well as the long-term planning. So I had a good grasp on that. But boy, like you don't know how you're going to make it work on $17,000 a year. And so I did within 2 weeks, I had another financial advisor who was helping me. They always say that usually after a loss, 70 to 80% of widows and widowers switch their financial advisor. Sometimes it takes some time, right? Like to
So
go
why
find
did
them.
you just felt that you needed to go in a different direction?
I did. I felt the gentleman, will be forever thankful for him. He got the life insurance that has allowed me to keep my house and to educate my kids right now. Like 3 kids through college ain't too shabby. Like that's a good thing.
Wow.
And I was very thankful for him, but he had transitioned his own job during that time that Greg and I had originally been his clients, and he was working more with succession plans and small businesses. I'm like, no, I need someone who's going to hold my little frail hand, right, on the days that are hard and say, it's going to be okay. Let's take this baby step. And I just knew that wasn't the organic match. So I actually reached out to the widow of the gentleman that played the bagpipes in my wedding. That's the connection. I had heard that he had passed and that she was doing okay and she had 4 kids. Followed my connections of like whoever she worked with, introduced me. Let's go.
Fantastic.
That's how I first found my financial advisor, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience to be able to be like, okay, what do I have to do now? And what can I push off? And I'm going to go raise these babies. And he was one of the people that actually encouraged me to switch my career after those 2 years. Like he knew I had those breathing room. I could still work because of the benefits of life insurance and of what I was making, the help of Social Security for survivors, for my children. I knew I could keep working for those first 2 years and mimic my kids' schedules because I think they were so new. They were speaking English in a school, right? For some of them, that wasn't a big thing.
Your kids, not only that, but they're new, they're in a new environment, they're doing all this, and they just lost their father.
Oh, yeah, they become that family real
quick.
God.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember my littlest Squish years later being like, Mom, it's so funny. And it wasn't funny, but he's like, somebody was sharing a story about when they were little, one of their neighbor's dad took his life. He's like, he was talking about me. But he had no clue that we were that family, right? Because of, and I'm proud to say, the seamlessness, the counseling, the everything that my kids and I had to be able to hold conversations with people about a very sensitive subject, and also about our non-traditional upbringing, right? Like, what school district did you come from?
Italy.
The English speaking, whatever. I'm like, oh Jesus. Like, we used to have like the minivan, like bomb sweat before we went into school. You don't do that. Like those conversations.
Wow. So what happened career-wise? So what did you switch to? Because now all right, you've got some stability.
Yeah.
You've got some stability, but you still need more.
Yeah. So I actually went.
So now what are you doing?
Yeah, after about 2 years, I went to my financial advisor and said, hey, what you did for me, I want to do for other people. How do I get there? So I had a degree in statistics. I had an MBA. I had worked in financial forecasting before. So he knew I had the numbers brain, like I was a statistics geek. And he kind of led me on that guide path of what I had to do to study to be a CFP, a certified financial planner. What experience did I need? What mentorship did I need to have out there? And how do I recreate my career? And that's what I did. I started taking Series 7, taking 66, anything that I needed. And I launched myself out, and we called it a zero book of business. Like there was no clients. It was just me out there in the world saying, hi, I'm working as a financial advisor and I really want to help families in transition. I've been there. I think I can hold your hand, and that's priceless. You want to work with me? And slowly I built my own practice. Sefton is my maiden name. So homage to my dad, who, worked many a job to educate me. He deserves it. But yeah. And so over time, I recreated my career to help families in transition with their finances. And 2020 hit, and all of us were like, whew, what do we do now? Right. But for me, that was an opportunity because we're licensed in just a few states. Here comes Zoom, and we can connect with so many people, and we're able to get our license if needed in other states. So all of a sudden my message could go bigger. Right.
That's wonderful. And look at how you're helping people. My goodness.
Yeah.
Great.
And that's when we took the time to start to write that book, because I was like, okay, I started to feel during 2020, 2021, that the clients I was seeing, I was undoing some of the mistakes that had been made financially, or opportunities that were missed. And it was breaking my heart. I was like, oh God, like they didn't even know they could seek for Social Security benefits, as an example, things like that. They missed all of that, or they didn't submit the documents. And now we have to fight real hard to get these accounts back, things like that. So I'm like, if I could just get the book into someone's hand, so if they lost a spouse early on and in the quiet of the middle of the night, they can read that book and get just a few good steps, maybe to avoid some potholes. And then that's what I need to do.
That's amazing. And the other thing I want to ask you about is, not only did you do this thing where you're recreating your livelihood, but you also had a primary path to healing through what you call the grief recovery method. And I really would like to share what that did for you and what that is, because it helps you heal this huge heartbreak. It gave you tools because you're now certified for that also. So not only do people get financial advice from you, but they also can get advice emotionally and in other ways. So would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. I had gone through like the traditional counseling, right? Like it was needed, right? I needed someone just to listen, because you're trying to act all brave, right? We call it, the award-winning act, right? That first year for me, like, I'm good. I got this, kids. We're fine. Right. And then you're like sitting on your therapist's couch, like, oh my God. Like he used to say, there's imaginary jars, and you have to put things in categories in imaginary jars and put them up on the shelf and take them down when you think you can digest them. You're not ignoring them. They're beautiful. They're up on that shelf, but put them back up sometimes, right? And just deal with what you had. And so I spent like a year and a half just with these imaginary jars, being like, I'm going to take you down, let me put you back up. And then I had actually talked to another widow that had mutual friends, and she said, oh yeah, I went to this practice called the grief recovery method. And she's like, it was so nice. It was just someone who hosted it. It was over 8 weeks. We had a really nice group of people joining in, and it talks you a little bit about your life experience, how you learned to grieve, when you've hit moments of grief, even when you were little, you didn't realize it, right? Through relationships, through moving, through loss of finances. Like there's 40 different ways to grieve according to the grief recovery method. I think there's more than that. I really do.
Goodness.
But it shows you a timeline, and then you can actually start to see, how are you interacting with grief from those experiences you had earlier on. And it takes you through a process of looking at your loss history graph, focusing on one relationship that you really want to deliver. We call them undelivered communications, because sometimes the person that we are focusing on during grief recovery have passed. So you can't apologize. You can't ask questions. What you can do is share the messages that you haven't delivered before. And it's such a beautiful, it's mathematical, my friends. It is a process. It sits well with my statistics like brain, but it's a process that takes you through there until you can finally relieve yourself of some of the communications that you have felt stuck with.
So for instance, if someone wants, in your case, you want to say a few things to Gregory, you've got some unresolved things you want to say to him. You're working with the grief recovery method. What does that look like? What is the advice for doing that?
Yeah,
Close your eyes and just talk away, or
no,
what do they say to do?
Yeah, it's a process. It's a method. So when I tell you, when I'm sitting with a group and I'm guiding them through this 8-week period, it is a method. Don't read ahead in the book, right? Just do your homework and have trust that we will get you there. So it starts with anything of first understanding grief, understanding how we learned to grieve, and really starting to think oh yeah, maybe when my dad told me, kids are quiet, don't be heard, right? Things like that. They have to be seen, not heard. What did that mean when I was really upset one day? Those are those small things that you start to dissect. And in no way are we saying blame it on the parents. No, that's not it. But how did I learn? How did I see my brave grandmom still be happy in the midst of a huge divorce? How did we see these things happen? And then you actually map out all of your losses from the dawn of conscious memory to where you are today. And then you focus on one of those relationships and the unresolved messages and what you want to send. So I've gone and I've done, not just even as an advisor, I've done 2 rounds of the grief recovery method as a student. I have yet to, quote unquote, pick the relationship of Greg to heal through. I've healed back relationships with my mom, who's still alive, and with my dad that passed, because my relationships with those 2 and how I learned to grieve impacted my year of fake it till you make it, right? Of after Greg, and how I still refer to my loss of Greg 9 years later. So that's the grief recovery method. I can't give you all the steps in the final part.
Right. But that's okay. But that's a great, it's another wonderful tool for people to access, to work through their grief. And I would imagine that when you do go through the history of the things that have affected you and grieving, you start to realize maybe I can choose to react a little differently. Maybe what I learned in the past wasn't the best way to deal with what I'm going through now, right? I would imagine that's why they call it, it's a discovery. It's not like recovery, but it's a discovery.
Yeah, definitely is. And I will say the one thing too, there's such a very sharp focus on the confidentiality, right? And the being completely honest. And it was the first time, many times, that it's a group of strangers pretty much, right? But I don't feel like they have judgment on me. They don't know me. So I'm going to be completely vulnerable, right? And maybe share that I was so mad at Greg, right? You feel oh my God, they're past their sainthood there, right? But I was so mad. Things like that, because of that confidentiality and that completely, the devotion to the process, to be honest, it's really helpful.
Yeah, helpful. It sounds it. Yeah. And that became the grief. And now you did this online, the grief recovery method, or you worked with a specific person?
Yeah, so actually, they did not have it online available until after 2020. So I did it in person. So now I actually offer in-person classes throughout the year here in Winmore, just as a volunteer basis. My give back to this community that rallied around my kids. They didn't know us, right? We just moved to the community after 2 months after Greg, or before Greg passed, and they've just been a lifeline for us.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, I give that back to them. But over 2020, the grief recovery method certified many of us to teach online. So now the grief recovery method is offered online, and that's what I'm offering in March and April of this year.
So what you have become, which is the way I would phrase it, is you've become part of people's wagon trains, because because what happened to me when I was grieving my husband, I had certain people that I called on my wagon train. I had my life transition coach, and I had an energy healer, and I had my accountant, and I had certain friends, and people come and go off your wagon train. So you're definitely on people's wagon train. So how about telling everyone, why is it important to get support, especially from professionals who can walk a widowed, grieving person through these most difficult moments. And what kind of helpful support did you, we already know you had an accountant helping you, and you had the grief recovery method. What other kinds of support did you put on your wagon train during your grieving process? Because I think it's really important for people to know that they can do this. They don't have to navigate this by themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I love that you use the term wagon train, right? Like I call it like your trusted contacts, right? Your go-to. In my book, I share that some of them are working as like, I use the example of like my son in football, right? And that they have the defensive line or the offensive line protecting the quarterback in the back, right? Like that's who it is. That was my wagon train. I was lucky because my sister is like, go get her. There's a problem. She's fixing it, right? So she was my blocker. She really was. She's polite. She's succinct. No one feels like they just got told off, but they kind of did at the same time for being very helpful, but maybe a little too nosy, right? Or things like that. So she was my first one on deck. And she just offered herself up there. I did have the one person that I walked through with all of my financial decisions, as you say, with the financial advisor, with the accountant, because I wasn't always fully present, right? Like your mind drifts, you're making decisions with widow fog. Sometimes you're just effing emotional, sorry, but sometimes you are. And so she'd be there taking notes, right? And making sure that when I came back, I'm like, what did they say about the life insurance and how do I file that? Those parts. I had the team of my late husband's family. They did all of the funeral plans. We buried Greg within 2 days of his loss very quickly. And they unfortunately had just buried 2 parents within that last 5 to 10 year period. And they were going, like, they already knew the process. They knew who they had to talk to. Here we go. And they would just come to me and be like, is that a good decision? So I had veto power, but they were running it. Some people are even like, yeah, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like I didn't.
And you were in fog anyway. What a relief that they were able to take it over.
And then as time went on, like that wagon train would ebb and flow, right? Sometimes it was people on my kids' baseball team, right? Because I had a lacrosse player, a football player, and a baseball player. How do you as one parent get there, right? And I remember teaching my son how to drive. We had a Google document so people could sign up and teach him how to drive because it stressed our relationship so much. And I wanted to continue to love my son, but teaching him how to drive did not help that, right?
That's brilliant, though. People are listening to this podcast and saying, wow, maybe I don't have to like go through that. I can get people to help with that.
And I'll tell you, it was very nice because I would always have a bottle of wine for some of these volunteers, knowing that they were going to need a stiff drink when they got out of the car. And so it was a win-win. My son got to drive. He learned how someone else drives, right? Because not all of us we all have our own habits. And then I got to decompress with someone afterwards, right? And they got to share that moment with me. What a nice way to connect. So that was a good one. And on my wagon train throughout years, it's come and gone, right? You have those friends that know you intimately, unconditional love, not going to make that judgment, right? And you have that new friend that didn't know Greg, wants to hear the story, but loves you for exactly who you are. I actually forget some of my friends now, 9 years later, never met Greg. And they have to remind me. They're like, we never knew Beige Boy. Like, like we didn't know him. But what a great thing too.
But through you, they know him.
Yeah. And then the kids and I are sharing funny stories and how he built our family with them. Yeah. I love that key. Wagon train. I'm using it.
Oh, good.
You steal it from you, love.
Go steal from me. Go for it. I talk about that in my own book. I mean, that was so important to me and I didn't realize until I had been through my widowhood a little while, like, oh my God, I have these people in place. They're my wagon train. Well, I had a friend. I mean, and I had a dear friend who had known Saul, and she was my cry, my person I could really let it out and cry to. People had different roles on the wagon train.
Yep. They do.
And they came and they went. They came in depending on what was going on. So now that everyone is listening to this, tell us what inspired you to write your book, A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years. And while you talk about the stages of financial decisions in widowhood. So let's get to the nitty gritty with this because it's so important.
Yeah. And as I shared a little bit earlier, it was really like, how do I get this message out there to a bigger bunch of people? How do I let someone feel independent and in control when I can't be sitting next to them? Right. So, or how do I help that person find that great financial advisor, and how to put their wagon train in place, right? Their trusted contacts. So it just went step by step, a little bit of my story so people understand where I came from. Right. So I think sometimes it's your story that builds that trust, that builds that relationship, and they're willing to read the rest of the pages because they're like, wait, sounds like she came out okay at the end. How'd she get there? Right. So here's
It's a great book for someone to gift someone who has just lost someone also.
Yeah. And
I
it's
would
funny.
think, no, I'm just saying, I would think that would be like a wonderful gift for someone to give your book.
Yeah. And I realized too that, and thank you for saying that I couldn't get it in the hands of people quick enough sometimes, because like I said, we buried Greg within the first 2 days. For sometimes it's a week or two, right? So there's a section on how to write an obituary, just like those stepping stones. But we recorded an Audible. So my kids voted and they said that I should read the Audible. So for those of you listening to my Philadelphia accent, you can have 4 hours of it. But what a great way to even sit in night one night, put in your earphones after a loss, and be like, all right, let's go together. What do I do next?
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
now what are those stages of financial decisions in widowhood?
Yeah, we say first is the immediate goals. Like those are the ones you have to make. There's no choice. They're hard, they're unfair, but you have to make those decisions. Things like, sometimes you need to go ahead and file for the life insurance because you don't have any money to pay for the funeral, right? That's a have to. Notifying employers, their immediate goals, things that you have to get done, applying for Social Security, filing the loss of your husband or your wife. Then we go into transitional goals. Now, for everyone, these are sliding scales, right? Like I was a person of action. I was getting them done quick. If you could have gotten me to year 3 goals in year 1, I would have tried to do it. But there's a process, right? So there's immediate goals, the have to. And then we have transition goals. They're the ones that are usually between year 1 or 2. Like we took care of all those immediate things that had deadlines that we need to make sure we kept the lights on in the house, right? That we had to process. But year 2 to 3, you might have processed that life insurance and then put it in a safe account, right? FDIC insured people. So make sure it's a safe account. And then wait to make the decisions with the money, whether you fund the kids' education, you pay off the house, you put it towards retirement. You don't have to make that decision right away if you have those immediate ones done, right? And you know that you can pay the bills and be able to wake up every morning in a safe house. Right. So the transitional goals are those next leading goals, the things that we just tabled, we couldn't really do when the world was spinning, but we're coming out of it now. And also remember too, the world feels very different in year 2 than year 1. What you thought was maybe shared goals with you and your spouse, well, now it's just you. That might have changed a little bit. And then we talk about long-term goals, and that's kind of like year 3 and beyond. And that's when I actually say, I think I mentioned it in the book, is when you get your groove on, right? Like I changed my career at year 2 to 3. And so my goals were very different. For me to go back to school full time, I had to be able to support my kids without me working. So how do we do this, right? And that's why I always say, if you are working with a financial advisor, make sure they have a plan for you. That plan isn't static. That is living and it's breathing and it's moving with you as you move through life with guidepost, right? Like we can do everything within reason, right? Because we have big long-term and short-term goals to balance. So immediate, transitional, and long-term goals. And I love my long-term goals too, because it lets you dream a little bit. Sometimes my 3-year was where I started dreaming of what do I want next? Like I'm not staying stagnant in this world. I'm moving. What's it going to look like? I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to vision it. I'm going to get there. Some people, they don't feel that way. They're still curled up in a ball in year 3, and that's all right. But you can dream again. And those are those transitional goals.
Also, your book like kind of inspires people that they can get through this.
Yeah.
Which is really great. And you also state in your book that an overlooked yet important part of coping with the financial challenges of widowhood is organizing documents, which sounds so boring. And so what would you like to tell everybody? It's important. So what would you like to tell people about that? And anything else you'd like to tell them about your book?
Yeah, the organizing documents. So yeah, you can definitely, on my website for the book, it's www.widow-wisdom.com. You'll see it says download your personal document locator. Like I walk the walk, I talk the talk. Like not only do I want you to have a filing cabinet, like my mom's envelope system when we were younger, that says like insurances, dog food, restaurants, like life insurance, water bill. I want you to have that, whether it be virtual or paper, right? But the personal document locator is almost like that gift to, if you aren't here, how's the next person going to find that? And the reason I find your information, the reason I say that is because I was extremely paranoid after Greg passed that something was going to happen to me, because of course it is, because bad things happen to my family. That was my thought process. So I need to be so organized so that my executor of my will, who is one of my good friends, knows where everything is and can take care of my babies, right? And here are the decisions I want for my babies. So that personal document locator, it's a little clip inside my mind. Where are your basic information? My girlfriend, Kristen, the executor of my will, had no clue what my social security number was. Why would she, right? She was a good friend. She wasn't my mommy. She's a good friend. So where is that information located? Where is the key to the safe deposit box? Which bank is the safe deposit box in? There's many police and fire credit unions in Philadelphia. Pick one, right? If I don't say it, how's she going to know? She's just going to stand there with the key. And then everything, even like a place to put those passwords, right? Like all of the past. I was so lucky that I was the spouse who handled all of our finances. Sometimes you can't do anything unless you have the passwords to get into accounts nowadays. That's that personal document locator. Where are things?
That's so important.
Where's the name of my accountant? Who's my estate attorney? Everybody, get your new 6-pack if you're a couple, your will, your healthcare directive, your power of attorney, 3, 1 for you, 1 for him, 1 for her, 1 for you. Like, it's your 6-pack. Have a party, do your estate documents. Very important.
That's so important. And you need to, of course, know that you can trust these people who are going to have access to your documents.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going to also make the comment that it would seem to me really important when someone's choosing a financial advisor during widowhood, like what you do, that they need to feel very comfortable with that person's persona and their style of communicating and all of that. So you need to be very, someone like you really understands what they're going through, and you have tremendous compassion and understanding. And I think that's important because, I've experienced where I've gone through different things and the person is so dry. And so don't bother me with your neediness, and it can be very off-putting when you're really grieving.
Yeah. And I often say too, like, if I'm putting on my financial advisor hat, like, I'm not the match for everybody, right? Like, maybe it is that I move really fast, or maybe it is that I am an optimist who worries, or maybe it is that I'm someone who mommies you through, like, I'm making sure you do those next steps. Maybe you need someone who gives you more of a wide berth, right? That's okay. And my job is to make sure that you know about the financial process. And that's what that book was for too, how to find that financial advisor, how to have the people you love make those first calls so you don't have to. It's hard to share your story a few weeks after loss.
I love that you give people advice for that. That's wonderful.
Oh, there's checklists and everything. If I can make it organized and systematized and you can follow a checklist, do it. Because then we can put our brain on pause and follow the checklist and hand it to our wagon train, our people that are helping us. Be like, hey, can you call these 5 advisors and give me the 2 you think I should talk to? Trust their judgment. Don't put them in charge of it if you don't trust their judgment. But yeah, that's how you free yourself up so that maybe you can take a bubble bath and stick on some earplugs and listen to an audiobook.
That's great. Now, you've got an inspiring story about working with your client named Marie, which is probably a great way to show how you work with people and how they benefit from what you do. So could you share that with us?
Yeah, so Marie actually had lost her spouse through a long, well, I say long, but a battle with cancer. For many, they might have thought it was pretty quick, right? But she was a caregiver, right? And she was spending all of her time. And he just kept reassuring her that she was going to be fine. Like, financially, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And so she just kind of took that as truth, right? And then after he passed, she was just numb. She was numb, and paperwork would come in and it would just get put on a dining room table, right? And she just wouldn't action it, or she'd get a reminder saying like, hey, we have only a 2-year period. Like, how do we do this? I got connected with her through a friend of a friend who knew I specialized in this and was just like, hey, like, can you just talk to her as a widow? Like, we need her to start making those next steps. It's been a while. And I did. And it wasn't perfect fit, right? Like it was almost like if she engaged with me as a financial advisor, she was going to have to start actioning these things. And it felt so much better to just live with her husband's words of he was going to be okay and not really dig into that box of paperwork and
Oh,
organize
wow.
yourself and find out you are going to be okay or not. She didn't want to find out if it was a yes or a no, right? It was a yes. Let's say it's a yes. But that was one of those, when I talk about organizing, I talk about the personal document locator. This was actually a client that came in with a box of paperwork. And we just sat there. We got a coffee, we got an herbal tea, and we took the time. And there was a shred pile, there was a keep pile, there was a we have to understand more pile. And then in further visits, we would go through those piles again, because something that we just went through it becomes the shred pile. I often say to grievers, like, do that with the clothing. If you don't know, like, you don't want to give away the lost spouse clothing or your mom's clothing, like, start with those piles. What's a definite keep? It's emotional. I gotta keep it. But we can do that with paperwork too. Like, what's a, oh yeah, gotta hold on to that one. Too important. So we would just start to organize. End all be all. She's fine. She's going to be on her own 2 feet. We talked a lot about budgeting, income flows, right? So that she could know that when he said we're going to be okay. Yeah. Did it take some effort? Was he the most organized? Nope. Did he have good intentions? He did, right? And the beauty of that relationship is, one, seeing her flourish. Two, the person that connected us dropped a note to my house that said, thank you for taking care of her. It's a different person. We've got her back. Like,
Wow.
that
Oh,
changes
that's beautiful.
lives. Like, that's why I wake up, right? And that's why I don't mind spending the extra time going through those boxes, right? And being polite, because sometimes you bump into things that they didn't want to share with their financial advisor. It's just in a box. You have to be polite. and that's it. It's like going to confession here. Whatever happens in this conference room stays here. So that's it. And now she's brought the next generation. Can you teach my daughter about understanding her employer benefit? She just graduated college. What's a 401k? Like, to be able to know that this person is trusting financial education to the next generation of women, none alone, right? Because she didn't have that financial education herself. Generational. That's the win. Like, wow.
Wow, and she passed it on. She passed it forward, which is even better. That's fabulous. And I also wanted to ask you about, you describe in your book a journey of forgiveness that you experienced the 3rd year after Greg transitioned. Forgiveness is such a big subject, especially when it comes to people who are widowed. So would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've alluded to it earlier. Like, I was angry, right? Like, I missed him terribly, and he was only 42, right? And we had just gotten to America, and that's the life I wanted to live and raise my kids. And damn it, you changed the plans, right? Like, you changed the plans. And we were that couple that had the happy marriage, right? And I was like, we were the ones that were going to make it. Very positive about that. And I had to really step back and understand, like, it's not for the forgiveness for me, for Greg. Like, I can step out of myself and be like, okay, I understand it. It was depression. I understand why people take their lives and the journey and the path and how I can help people in the future. But personally, you can still stamp your feet sometimes. So I actually had to sit and be like, okay, I cannot control what God does. I cannot control what anyone else does. I can only control what I do. And that's where the forgiveness came in. I didn't want to walk around angry at him. I wanted to walk around celebrating him. I wanted my new friends to know how great he was. That's when it changed. When I realized, like, I'm on this journey. Like, I have a second chance at this whole world, and I'm still damn young, right? And I've got these 3 babies to make into incredible humans. That's going to be my best gift on this earth. So how do I do that if I'm walking around mad that this happened to me?
And not only that, you're not being a good role model for your kids, because they're going to think that no matter what happens in life, they have to hold on to that and they can't move forward. Right.
And that was it. It was really, so every morning I say to myself, I have a fresh 24 hours. What are we going to do with it? Like, I've got to forgive myself for what I did the 24 hours past, right? And there's a line of forgiveness I have to give myself, right? Carry some baggage. But I have to forgive myself, and this is a fresh 24 hours. What am I going to do with it? And I can only control me, my outlook, and the experience I want for my kids, for my clients, for my family. And sometimes that's realizing too that I forgive myself that I can't change others, right?
That's Beautifully said, and so true. You have an 8-week virtual recovery support group. So tell us about that, because that sounds like a really positive, constructive thing for people to participate in. And also, let us know, how can the members of our audience connect with you? And do you have a special offer for them?
Yep, definitely. So the grief recovery method that I do in person since 2020, we've been able to do it on Zoom now. So we're offering new Zoom classes. So they're limited to just 8 members. And why? Because it is small group oriented. So we want to make sure that these groups actually build that foundation within one another. And if it gets a little bigger than 8 on Zoom, I can't control that, right? And so it's a very nice, intimate process. 1 day a week, 2 hours 2 hours a week, 1 day, same night. And you can find any information on that on my website for the book. It's www.widow-wisdom.com, or go to the grief recovery method, and there's microsites. So it's
mostly an emotional support group.
It is.
With a little financial flavor thrown in occasionally.
Well, I can't say, I ooze talking about money, but this is going to be the grief recovery method a little separate. I do have a podcast too, which is called Widow Wisdom and Wealth. And that's where you'll start to get that financial flavor in light of family transitions, that divorce. Because sometimes, I stayed away from the divorcees because I was like, no, I do go with widows. Like, I don't know how to do this divorce thing. Their grief is so different and sometimes so hard to progress with because it's ongoing, right? Like, I knew where I stood after Greg passed. I knew it was a hard journey, but my finances were stuck in time. For divorcees, they're still impacted by someone else. So that's where I started working with the divorcees too, and being able to ride that wave of ever changing, right? And being able to prepare for the, what might happen, those rainy day funds, things like that. So on that podcast, Widow Wisdom and Wealth, you can find that on Google, Spotify, Apple Play. That's where we kind of bridge that grief and the finance talk together. And the free group out there too. On the virtual groups, there is a fee for the virtual groups out there. That's a requirement for the grief recovery method, but I offer scholarships. So if that's something you can't afford, please reach out to me. It's Donna@widow-wisdom.com, and we'll see what we can do, because I think the grief recovery method, again, it's not therapy. It's like a linear transition of your timeline, can help you improve your relationships moving forward. Yeah,
that's great.
A gift that keeps on giving. So
is that your special offer? Do you have anything else that you want to tell everyone about?
Yeah, we have the free download of the personal document locator. And if anybody wants to kind of talk in reference to the finance stuff, you can just go ahead and talk to me on Sefton Financial. I do no charge discovery sessions for like an hour and a half. And I say, I'll point you in the right direction.
That's right? Fantastic.
You'll come out knowing something you didn't know.
That's
I'll give you that.
Fantastic, Donna. And what is your important message about the importance of healing, because you've done a lot of that, and how does that grief recovery method help to turn those lemons into lemonade for people?
That's a loaded one. I think I had an answer earlier, but no. Yeah, no, it's not going to fit now. It's not going to work. God, I think my message out there is find what works for you. Right? The grief recovery method fit for me. I am that statistics major, that linear person, that cold Brit. My dad was from Britain, right? Who now cries at anything, right? Like, I got unleashed through it. So that worked for me, but maybe it doesn't work for everyone. Maybe you need one-on-one, right? Maybe you need a dart league, but find what works for you, and keep that as yours. Not everyone needs to know your magic solution. It's okay. But don't stop. Keep that community around you, but find what works for you.
And find something that works for you, because you do not have to stay in pain all the time. You can move through it. And we both know that. And what is the Donna important tip for finding joy in life?
I will go back to my 24-hour rule. I really do. That and a second husband who's really cute. Like, he's awesome.
We left out that tidbit.
That's another podcast. But he is adorable inside and out. But no, it is the 24 hours. And I think it was author Joe Vitale shared this. And it was to lay in bed for just a little bit in the morning and just say to yourself and your inner self, like that inner soul, like, thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And I lay in bed and do that for a good 5 minutes in my head, just to refocus myself on like, I have this moment and I have the soul that I have inside of me. And this is the journey we're on together. So to my soul, thank you. And I love you. And please forgive me. And I'm sorry, because we're not perfect.
Yeah, we're going through this lifetime. We have lots of things that we're learning all the time. And this is our journey. Absolutely true. Donna, your book, A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years, provides such a valuable resource that helps grieving people navigate those challenging years of widowhood. Thank you. I mean that. Thank you for being such an admirable role model and guide for this incredibly difficult challenge that no one ever wishes to face. And I thank you from my heart for this comforting, insights-filled, empowering interview today. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. As I like to say, to be continued. Many blessings. And bye for now. And thank you so much, Donna.
Oh, thank you, Irene, for this opportunity. It's been glorious.
Thank you so much. To be continued.